Hello, and welcome to Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for The Smallest Power. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, and communication, as well as moderator for this conversation. We're very pleased to be joined by the director of The Smallest Power, Andy Sarjahani. He's an Iranian-American documentary filmmaker and cinematographer that was raised outside of Arkansas Ozarks. His work focuses mostly on human ecology, climate adaptation, threats to democracy, masculinity, and nuances within the American South. He has worked on documentaries as a cinematographer for organizations such as Vice, Al Jazeera, Story Syndicate, and PBS, and also on multiple documentaries. A very talented person. Andy, hello and welcome.
Hello, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here as well, too. Uh, Before we started this recording, we had a chance to chat a little bit. And actually, this is, despite your experience in working in film and television and documentary, this is your first animation that you worked on. Can you tell me why you decided to venture into the animation world for this particular project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in as is the case with any film, the story sort of dictates the form. I've worked as a cinematographer on exclusively verite pieces. I've directed verite pieces. I've participated in verite pieces. I've done interview-based films, and this one, there were a couple of reasons. The first and foremost was just the participant's anonymity and her safety, and so that felt like the best medium with which to communicate this sort of like slice of life anecdote and act of courage and resistance from her. The second is just geopolitical barriers. It's extremely difficult to travel to and from Iran, especially at this time, and bring in media and bring out media. And so this animation was the appropriate fit for her story.
Indeed, it was. Did you ever consider doing something else, such as getting someone to portray characters and not having their face seen and so forth, and use newsreel footage and something like that? Did you consider that as well?
No, I think from the beginning, I kind of had an idea of this could be an archival, like user-generated content, as you see in the credits. So the credits is sort of a continuation in a sense of the story. User-generated, archival, and animation. That was sort of my vision from the beginning.
Right. This story, I understand, is personal to you, and it's one of the reasons why you worked on this film. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm half Iranian, half my family lives in Iran. I've spent extended periods of time there in recent years. When this uprising began, and the government was cracking down, I began getting sort of what I would call dispatches from friends and family there uh, via text or audio messages. The government had shut down cell service and internet um, throughout the country, and that was sort of spotty. I mean, it was kind of depending on the day, depending on whether or not people could get their message out. And so, as people were able to use VPNs, virtual proxy networks, they were able to send me certain dispatches, if you will. And I began to just get an entire, I don't know, just began to collect dispatches from random friends and family. It was almost like I was a sounding board on the outside of what they were dealing with. And so for me, it was very difficult to not be able to do something about that, to not be able to go. It's like, how can you best assist the situation? And with current sanctions, I can't even send money to Iran. So um, just began thinking about how can I use my skill set and how can I amplify one of these stories. In a perfect world, if I had, a massive budget, I would have created a series of every single person's story. I mean, that would be, I think, it was incredibly difficult to pick pick just one, but just due to budget and time constraints, I was sort of forced to, and my hope was that it would be representative of the immense amount of individual resistance and courage showed by everyone that I know and that it are throughout the country.
Interesting. So, when you decide to green light this project and just go forward with it, what was the first thing you needed to do? Did you work on the script, work with the animators, try to figure out what the story you were going to tell? Tell us what you decided to do.
Yeah, so the first thing I did was I needed to kind of narrow down which single story I was going to use for this film. And so I picked this particular story because of there were multiple reasons, and I'm happy to get into that a little later, but there were specific reasons that I felt like this was the best one to focus on, given, the inability to focus on everyone. Then I began just having conversations with her, recording them. Just we would like start talking, and I would sort of interview her, and she would record on her end, I would record on my end. She would record from a closet for good audio, and then she would send her recordings to me via uh, uh, an encrypted messaging service. And as I began to get those, I began to transcribe, put them in Premiere, transcribe everything, and then you start to build out a story arc, if you will, and a radio edit. So I sort of built out the entire story first. I picked the story, built out, I conducted several interviews and conversations that she and I both recorded. She sent them to me, and then I basically ended up editing all that down. And once that was completed, that actually took a couple of months. Then I began to look to build out an animation team.
Oh, great, great. That's interesting how not only did she record in a closet for good audio, but also for privacy too. So people would hear
Yeah.
what she was saying too. Oh, so once you have the story developed and you got the animation, you got it done. What was your hope? What did you want people to get from this piece? What exactly did you want people to get?
That's a good question, and there's always so many things you want people to take from it because it is so layered for me. I would say that, first and foremost, people are not their governments, especially when that government is a dictatorship. And so the people of Iran, there's 80 million civilians there that live under a brutal dictatorship, and they are, in my opinion, unfairly defined by that brutal radical dictatorship in Western media and through political pundits. And so it's so difficult to represent humanity from that region. It's happening right now with Palestine, and I think that's something that it's important to me to display, the humanity of people that have sort of whose identity, in a sense, has been hijacked by extreme factions. And so that I think is one. I think number two, I think is just as she says in the film, she sees Iran as her home, and so many people think there's an anti-immigrant bias in the U.S., and many people think that people just want to come spill over the borders into the U.S. And sometimes the reason for that is because their home country has been destroyed, and that's often because of U.S. interference. And so I think that in this situation, this woman sees Iran as her home and wants to stay, and and sort of reclaim a free society, work towards a free society. And I think that was incredibly remarkable to me. She's well equipped to go anywhere in the world. She speaks 3 languages. She's a doctor. incredibly talented and is able to would be able to set up and be successful in any country. And she is making a very risky decision to stay home and sees Iran as their own country. And so I just applaud that and have the utmost respect for that courage, and want to give my tiny little drop of support through this film to her and the millions of other people like her that are making the same decisions. I would not blame them at all if they wanted to leave. You know, I have no idea what it's like to grow up under that regime. And I have many cousins who have left, understandably so. And it takes an extraordinary amount of courage and resolve to stay. And I wanted to just honor that. And I think that, you know, it's really important to know. I think people are aware of this, but women have very, very little rights in Iran. And that's a big part of what kicked off the whole woman life freedom movement. And so after the murder of Gina Mahsa Amini. And so it was important for me to humanize an Iranian woman's, a contemporary Iranian woman's, just a small bit of her perspective. There's no way I could get all of it in a 7-minute film, but I that was important to me.
And that's great that you're bringing this to the light. What has the response been to your film? Not just here. I'm not sure if it's screened internationally. I'm just curious as to what the response has been like.
No, it's been incredibly positive from the Iranian diaspora. I mean, it's made, you know, it's been shared abundantly by the Iranian diaspora, many of whom I think there is a common goal. And for many of them, I mean, they might have nuanced differences, but the common goal is to live in a free society there and to have an equal rights for women there. And I think that that I think there was I think that I received some pretty heartfelt messages, to be honest with you, just about, you know, sort of feeling seen by someone, you know, in the West. And the reason I'm, you know, connected to that world is because half my family is there. My dad immigrated from there. And so it is important for me, because I don't feel like there's a fair shake for the civilians of Iran and in Middle Eastern and Muslim immigrants in general. And so any opportunity I have to kind of like say like, hey, there's it's just way more nuanced than what you think it is. Through my work, I'm gonna try to do that, and I feel like that it resonated with a fair amount of folks. And I you know, another thing I would say that's really important is that I have a few really close, trusted Iranian female friends that I consulted regularly throughout the making of this film, because they were, a few of their names are in the special credits. A couple of them I could not list because for their safety and anonymity. At their request, I did not list them. And so they were just sort of like my ultimate, you know, collaborators, in the sense of like I was able to talk with them about like being as thoughtful as possible about making sure this edit and what you see represented in the animation was honored the experience.
That's great. I'm so glad you did that, collaborated with women to help tell this story. It's just so important to do that for this piece. With that said, now that you received the response and you looking back on it, is there something that you wish you had it done different, or are you pleased with how everything had turned out in the film?
Well, you know, I think there's always things you can wish you could do differently, and you always learn in hindsight. I think that and then you just apply those to the next project in terms of like how you approach it, what the right, kind of what the right sort of framework to approach the film with. I think that's true for probably every film, but that's every film I've made, there's always like, oh yeah, I didn't know that going in, and I'll do this differently next time.
Exactly, especially with working on the animation. Well, what advice would you give someone that has worked on, live action films and they do want to make that leap to animation? What advice would you give them? Because I'm sure you learned a lot, even though you knew a lot, you learned even a lot more.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think it's so critical to really vet your collaborators. And like, especially with such a sensitive topic, I think that would be probably the thing, like, the thing that I feel, would be like an important, it's such an important process. And in many ways you work with the animator like you work with a director of photography. I'm also a director of photography with documentary. And so it's a very much like a director DP relationship. And so I would say, really be thoughtful and intentional about who you're bringing on to your team, and that they're really honor and supportive of the vision that in the story that you're trying to tell. And I think that will just make everything feel, I think that's essential in any film, but I think when you're kind of shifting over, you want to make sure that they honor, kind of your vision for what you initially set out to do.
Right. So what's next for you? What can we expect to see from you? Another animation or something else?
Well, I just had a film released 2 days ago on Independent Lens. It's called Wild Hogs and Saffron. It's a short documentary that I had on the festival circuit this past year. And along with two other short documentaries that I had on the festival circuit that have been released. I am currently in production on a feature documentary titled Iranian Hillbilly. I will hopefully, be, kind of closing in, completing that in 2025, resource contingent. And that's a big part of my day-to-day now.
That's great. That sounds really interesting. Iranian hillbilly. Interesting. Okay, well, great. Well, Andy Sarjahani, thank you so much for joining us, director of The Smallest Power. And I'm sorry, the last question I have for you, yeah, we still have a couple minutes left. The Smallest Power, the title for the film, is that something that came about at the beginning, middle, end, and why did you call it The Smallest Power?
The title came about because of what she says in the film. I
Mhm.
don't have the power to do anything about a child being killed in another city, but I have yet the smallest power. And I think many of us feel that way sometimes, and I think that the film is about small acts of resistance and the collective acts of small acts of resistance. And so I think that's where I really wanted to, pay homage to that with the title.
Exactly. And all of us have the smallest power to affect change as well, too. So,
And absolutely.
well, thanks so much. I wish you all the best. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work as well. You take care.
Thanks so much, sir. You have a great day. Thank you all for having me.
Mhm. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about our upcoming film festival, please visit us at clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.